This is a video that goes a little bit into more depth on mentorships. As described in a previous video, I was quite lucky in that my parents bought me a property for £23,000 in the year 2000. That's what basically got me started on my property journey. It was the best BRRR I've ever done, and we didn't even know what we were doing. It was quite run down, it was done up, and then 4 years later the whole area boomed, so it went from 23,000 to 90,000. That was sold, and they subsequently bought one in Coventry, and then I later built on that when I started working and learning more about property investment. So by 2018 I already had 9 buy-to-let properties. It was only then that I, by googling around, found property events. I was working in London at the time, and there seems to be a property event at the Hilton next door, so I went along and discovered this community of people who were very into property, and I'd never come across this before. So it shows you can already grow quite a bit of resource by not doing any kind of mentorship. But I thought at that stage that I needed mentoring. I wanted to get to the next level. I wanted someone to help me optimize what I already had and then build on it in the most effective and efficient way. I quite liked the community, so I started going to more of their events. Then I signed up for the 3-day course, and then you have to be wary sometimes because the way they sell events to you can be a bit enticing. There then came a quote-unquote application process for the mentorship, and you're asked to explain why you think you'd be good for the mentorship and what you'd be able to contribute. So in some instances they tried to get you to sell to them rather than them selling you the course. So psychologically this can make you feel that if you don't sign up you're not somehow good enough. But at that stage I thought I needed the mentorship. I decided to go for it, and because of that quite a few of my colleagues at work did the same. They followed suit and signed up as well. This mentorship was over £6,000, but it was for 12 months, and it included deal clinics, monthly masterminds, one-to-one lessons every month. So there was quite a lot included in it. Not everything was of the highest quality though, but as with everything, it is what you make of it. So I was on this mentorship for about a year. I eventually started to use the one-to-ones as sort of stop-off points. So I'd go about my work and research during the month, see what I could do, and whatever I was stuck on I would list down and try to get that resolved at the next one-to-one session. It wasn't really a hand-holding type of arrangement where your mentor comes with you to help you to do everything. And I think most mentorships are like this. I did meet someone else on that mentorship who had been on a previous one that cost about £25,000, and that was one where they literally come to your city and find the best estate agents and do a lot of the work for you, from my understanding. But anyway, this one went on for about a year, and I learned all about rent-to-rents, deal sourcing, potentially getting into commercial property. But I think one of the most important nuggets of information was that it was simply the right move sold prices. I did not know that before this. It's quite a basic thing, but properties can be listed for any price, but it's what the nearby neighbouring properties have sold for. That's what's most important. So if you're considering any kind of property, you have to find a like-for-like case or something very similar that has sold for a certain price in a certain area. Only then you'll know if the property you're buying is overpriced or not. As there were over 100 students on this course, I think the mentor probably didn't have enough time to dedicate to each person individually. And I think this is what quite a few people had issues with. When the attention is divided that much, then it's hard to know everyone's case all the time. Plus he was very busy with his own ventures. Every kind of course like this has its pros and cons. It wasn't all bad though, and the thing is, you don't realise what you learn. It's only when I think back to that time, I remember the kind of conversations I was having back then, which I would find almost laughable now, but you don't know what you don't know. So for example, if you're not learning something from your mentor, you have a community and you can see what other people in the community are up to, and they can inform you of deals going in different parts of the country, and everyone specialises in different parts of the country, and so there's different kind of specialist knowledge in different pockets of the mentorship. This can often be advantageous, but again it can give you too many options, and you can often end up getting distracted, which is what happened to me to some extent. But all in all, I kept on this mentorship, and in the last lesson, the last one-to-one I had, it felt a bit more like a sales pitch for the second year, which is what put me off it, to be honest. And by then I hadn't got into any kind of commercial development, so I'd looked into deal sourcing to some extent, but then realised so many people were trying to do this. If I kept trying to do this, then I probably would have had success, but I felt a bit put off by the competition. And then I started to go to other courses based on this mentorship about deal sourcing, and realised you need accreditation and things like that. Overall, I felt that wasn't for me at the time, but it was all a learning experience. So I didn't sign up with this mentor because I more or less kept doing what I was already doing, buy-to-let properties, but in a slightly more efficient way, and by then I learned what I needed to know. After this I went on my own, so this was 2018 into 2019 when I did this mentorship. Then I started to go to other events. I'd moved back to Coventry, I went to PIN events here and then, my next mentor was one of the hosts of these events. He was a good guy, and he said at my stage I should be getting to developments and commercial developments and things like that, so I started to go down that route. But I found that a bit complex and a bit challenging. I was phoning planners, architects, surveyors, and they were all telling me to go and speak to different people. Again, if I persisted with this, I probably would have found success. I just didn't find it very time efficient. And again, your access to your mentor can be limited, and at this stage he was also in the process of moving to a different country, which made things a little bit more tedious. But more importantly, at this time I met this local property agent who I've mentioned numerous times, and I could tell, and he was quite clear about the fact that he'd grown a lot of wealth just by doing simple buy-to-let things. So a lot of the things you get distracted by in terms of commercial property or rent-to-rent or deal sourcing, whatever it may be, he reminded me that if you just keep things simple and keep them as boring as possible and just repeat them, then you can grow wealth that way. Also, he had an agency, and if I continued to do buy-to-let properties, he would manage them, help me source them, and help me to grow wealth in a more efficient way. So ultimately I ended up not doing the commercial to residential stuff, and I went back to the simpler buy-to-let stuff using specialist local knowledge from this guy. He was basically streamlining my property journey and doing it in my hometown where I resided, which, although not mandatory, is very helpful. So I just kept with this into 2020, 2021. Then obviously COVID hit. So I thought my property was relatively well taken care of. I decided to venture into internet businesses. So I then signed up with people who taught you how to make money on the internet, who I'd also met in London. And then I decided to follow up. That was £5,000 for a year. And again, it was based on monthly meetings. Those were the prime aspect of it. And to be honest, I felt that did not work for me. I think my mentor was quite different for me, and he was trying to get me to do things that were more in line with his personality than with mine. Perhaps that's why it didn't quite work out. Also, I did not work flat out 24/7. I think to do a lot of these things you do have to work a lot harder than you realise. Although I did put in the effort, I found whatever I was doing didn't really seem to be working, and I could never quite get things right according to him. So ultimately this didn't really go anywhere. So I kept trying to do internet things on my own. On the back of this, I did build a channel that actually did grow quite quickly. It gained quite a decent following, but I just didn't happen to follow this up, and that's something that needs bearing in mind. A lot of the time doing these things you have to keep working at them consistently for months or even years. I didn't quite have that at that stage. In 2022 I worked with this agent guy and this solicitor sourcer who I mentioned in a previous video, and they were basically my power team for Coventry, and they really helped me ramp up my portfolio. They had the right connections, the correct knowledge. I worked with the right solicitor, the purchase lister who I mentioned in a previous video, and this was a really good streamlined operation. Also, I was data science contracting at the time, which really helped me build my earnings and accelerate my journey. That of course was done without any mentorship, so the power of networking up till this stage had proven to be far more effective than mentoring. I did have a consultation with a very senior person in the property world, and just before the meeting he told me that it was his belief that no kind of mentorship can ever really make you rich anyway. It's all your work and graft networking and contacts. That's what really gets you there, and I found that to be the case. Although mentorships can be very useful in a lot of cases, you can learn a lot from them, but your mentors don't go out and do the work for you. They're not, for example, deal sources, or they may not have huge local knowledge about the area you're interested in. So this can affect things, whereas people who generally do business in the areas you're living in could be far more effective at these things. For example, the solicitor sourcer, he wanted to build his money through deal sourcing, and he knew the city extremely well. And the agent guy knew the city like the back of his hand. He obviously wants more properties to manage for his agency, and it was in his interest to help me to buy more properties that he would make money from, as I've mentioned in previous episodes. Then in 2023 that was my next mentorship, and that was another internet business mentorship, and to be honest that was probably one of the worst investments I've made. It was a lot of money for a 6-month course type of thing, and there was no one to check in with, so there was no direct mentor, but I was able to ask any question I wanted. I should not have been signed up for the course. I think I was talked around by their sneaky sales tactics, and I ended up gaining a lot of knowledge but no solid business out of it. It was for people who were far more advanced than me in their internet business journey. I did learn a lot but did not really make much from that venture. The person in question does overall get very good reviews on the internet. I'm sure it's good for certain types of people who are at certain levels in their businesses. For example, many of the students were making between 10 and 30,000 per month apparently, and they just needed help to get to the next stage. So for that sort of thing it's quite helpful, but not in my case. Then in late 2024 I signed up with someone else who helped me to basically start making videos like these. That was quite costly, but I found I was just spending a lot of time waiting around. So it was up to me to shoot the content, and then his team would divide it up and make shorts out of it and things like that, and even make AI clones of me. But this seemed to be taking longer than expected, and I think I could have made these sorts of things quicker by myself at that stage, so I cancelled that. And my latest mentorship is one wherein I have a huge personal tax issue, and this person has extensive commercial experience, so he aims to teach me to use commercial property investment in order to reduce my personal tax. I've been on this for a few months, and it is a bit tedious at this stage, and there seems to be quite a lot involved, and there's a lot of nuance to it in terms of approaching agents and going about it. It does require quite a bit of specialist commercial property knowledge and having a good accountant that understands capital allowances. Again, the most you seem to get is 1 hour per month. It would be better if I could have more than this, but I'll see how this one goes, and if it's not fruitful, I may have to learn what I can and then move on. Overall, we all have different attitudes and personalities. I have worked quite hard at quite a few things in my life. Perhaps if I'd stuck with any one of these mentorships and just done absolutely one thing for many years, then I may have been very successful. I believe people like Ali Abdaal have done this. You see the end result of people who have made it very big on the internet, but in his case I think it was about 8 or 9 years before he started making huge amounts of money. And I think the same goes for many of the other mentors we see on YouTube. It's easy to think that these are just instant results or things that can come about after making a few videos, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot of graft and work behind the scenes that we never see. So basically you have to consistently keep doing things for long periods of time and expect no return, and just hope they go somewhere, and one day they maybe will. So in essence, mentorships can be very useful in certain ways. They're great for networking or giving a bit of direction, but they can't do the real work for you. It's still up to you to go and find the deals, find the right people to manage, and other related things. They can also give you good solicitors and contacts like that. So there are pros and cons to them all. If you think of mentorships, it's still worth very much considering them. I think they would be a good thing if you're young and starting out. When I started, I just did it of my own accord and just went for it. So taking action always helps, but I realised earlier on in my journey I could have fine-tuned a lot of things, and I perhaps wouldn't have been in this ridiculous tax situation that I'm in if I'd had proper mentoring at the time. If choosing a mentor, it's better to focus on one who's teaching a fewer number of people, because this gives you more time with the mentor, and make sure they've gotten good reviews, and ideally ask ex-students as to how good their service offered was. Thanks for listening. See you again.